Welcome. We are coming on the evening of the East Coast, and it is late night in Europe. We have an amazing guest today. This is Jan Lynn-Matern. Matern?
Perfect.
I would have butchered that either way. Who is one of the partners of and founder and partners of Emerge Education, which is one of the most innovative and thoughtful edtech and impact investing firms out of Europe. I have followed their stuff for a long time. You should definitely read their Medium and check out all their reports. They do great stuff. And he has been thinking for a while about the next unicorns. For those who don't speak investor speak, that's $1 billion company, and he has a lot to say about it. So I'm going to take myself off camera here. We have about 100 folks coming in and more coming in every moment. I'm going to take myself off camera and pass it over to Jan.
Sweet. Thank you, Alex. And yeah, welcome everybody. My name's Jan. I'm the founder and one of the general partners at Emerge. We are the only specialist edtech investor globally focused on the pre-seed stage, so the very early stage. And we do what we do because we got lucky. Our parents were born into poverty. The partners at Emerge are first-generation university students. And our vision is to provide others with the same opportunities that we've had at scale, using technology so that they don't have to rely on the same luck that we had. And since inception, we've backed over 80 founders that share that vision, and they have impacted rather 26 million lives. Super high level, we invest in 3 mega trends. Digitization of education, which is about scaling high quality education delivery at low marginal cost. Workforce development, which is about developing and measuring skills and connecting labor and employers. And personalized learning, which is about scaling pedagogical best practice through technology. And if we zoom out and think about those 3 big problems, they've been tackled in different ways over the last 25 years. And we think if you look at the scale up and unicorn creation in edtech, 3 key waves. The first one was education SaaS, software as a service. So companies like Blackboard and Degreed. Second wave, marketplaces content. Companies like Coursera, Go1. The third wave were tech-enabled services like Trilogy, Multiverse, Guild. But today, virtually all of the exciting companies that are coming across our desk are in this 4th wave of AI-powered learning. So that's where we're expecting to invest the majority of our capital over the next 3 years, and how we're going to tackle those 3 big problems that I talked about. And personally, I believe AI is the next big opportunity for edtech because it's adding the human touch that edtech 1.0, 2.0, and 3.0 were missing. And because we can now scale high quality pedagogy, personalized learning support, the kind of stuff that traditionally only humans could do. And today's unicorns sit at the bottom right of this chart. So the dimensions are high scale, low efficacy. What I believe is that we now have the potential to build unicorns that sit at the top right of this chart. So high scale and high efficacy. And that's really exciting because it'll finally enable us to democratize access to opportunity and address parts of the market where there's until now been non-consumption. For example, providing better study support to those who can't afford one-to-one tutoring, identifying skills and potential based on people's output rather than their CVs, enabling educators to spend more time with students, building relationships with them rather than on the admin of the job. And we've identified 8 high-level trends that we call engines of opportunity that illustrate how AI is being used in education today and how we think it'll be used in the future. They fall into 2 main categories. One is making learning more engaging, and 2 is making work and teaching more efficient. And in the first, we have 4 engines of opportunity: robo-teacher, always-on feedback, hyper-personalized content, and simulation-based learning. And in the second, we have 4 more: democratized authorship, AI-enabled knowledge graphs, and automated assessment and educator co-pilots. And across those 8, over the last 12 months, these categories have raised $620 million in VC funding globally. But as you can imagine, that funding was not distributed equally. And what I want to share with you today is our analysis of 234 early stage startups and 27 incumbents that sit in these categories. And for each of these categories, we've created a hotness score. So it's composed of, first, an indication of the recent early stage activity. How many early stage companies were founded in that category? And how much VC funding has gone into those companies over the last 12 months. So the more companies and the more funding into them, the higher the score. Second is, what is our perception of the incumbents' reaction and their ability to adapt quickly? So where we've seen incumbents either reacting or where we think they're likely to react quickly, that meant a lower score for the category. And then the last is our own perception of how excited we are to invest in the category. So the more excited we are, the higher the score. And here you can see all 8 categories ordered by their hotness score, starting at the top with AI-enabled knowledge graphs, all the way to the bottom to automated assessment. And also in this table, you can see, of course, a definition of each of the engines, which of the market segments they're most likely to have an impact in, from early years on the left to adult learning on the right. And what I'm going to do now is talk through some examples of the top scoring categories. So it's very clear that, of course, some have had a lot more activity, both from founders and investors, than others. And we're going to start there. So the first is AI knowledge graphs. If you think about what is this about? If you think about how we access our data today, be it as an individual or as an organization, you realize quickly that it's quite broken. We have these tree structure folders that you have to wedge your information into. It's incredibly time consuming to add metadata to this data. When it comes to actually retrieving information and getting insights out of our data, we have to search using keywords and tags, when all you really want to do is just ask a question and get a natural language response. And the core concept of AI knowledge graphs is to enable individuals and organizations to capture unstructured data, so you don't have to think about the trees, dynamically categorize it, i.e. it does it automatically, and then to handle complex retrieval queries using natural language. And we think it's a hugely exciting category because it's such a huge problem, and until now, it's not been possible to really solve it. Looking at the hotness score, we looked at 31 startups, which have raised $53 million in the last 12 months. And that's just the early stage companies raising money. It's not counting the incumbents. And actually, when thinking about the incumbents, we also came to the conclusion that it would be pretty difficult for them to meaningfully compete here, because AI knowledge graphs will fundamentally reimagine how we engage with our data. So new startups will have a big opportunity to reimagine the products in this category. To give 2 examples of subcategories, one where we saw the most activity in to date was in improving access to academic knowledge. So an example here is our portfolio company Causally, which indexes the world's corpus of medical knowledge and then enables researchers to understand the concepts in these papers, but also, crucially, the relationships between concepts in these papers. Another subcategory that we're hugely interested in is this idea of creating large language models for skill assessment based on your own company's definition of top performance, which we think would have applications in recruitment and career progression. There's this huge amount of tribal knowledge that sits in hiring managers' spreadsheets and Notions and so on that's not captured and not used for these core processes. And we think AI knowledge graphs have the potential to bring it all together and make it something that the whole company can benefit on. And a second example of a subcategory here is educator copilots. So this category is about tools that enable learning designers and educators to create learning materials and manage learners more time efficiently. It matters because teachers spend 1/3 of their time planning, preparing, marking. Learning designers and corporates spend billions every year outsourcing the creation of learning materials to agencies and studios. And it's a very natural area for large language models to start adding value, given that they're exceptional at generating text. So in terms of hotness score, we looked at a whopping 68 startups, which raised $51 million in the last 12 months. But unlike in the previous category, we do think that there is a medium-high threat here from incumbents. As an example, funded incumbent L&D learning management systems and authoring tools like 360 Learning have added text-based AI authoring features very quickly. But we do see meaningful competition coming in from startups. So for example, in the form of interactive, rich media course creation tools that these incumbents would find it more difficult to compete with. We have a company in the portfolio called Colossian, which does that. They're using proprietary text-to-video AI models to generate video courses. Another subcategory in this engine that's very active are co-pilots for educators that are focused on creating learning material, like Professor Jim, lesson plans like Magic School. And relatively speaking, this is an exciting category because obviously it's solving a massive problem for teachers. But it is important to note that companies in this subcategory have received probably 10 times less funding on a per company basis than the L&D subcategory. And it's just an indication that there are a ton of small projects going after this educator materials co-pilot area, and not all of them are going to scale. And it's perhaps an indication of just how difficult it is to scale K-12 companies generally. So those are two examples from the top categories. And then I did want to look at the bottom categories as well. And just because they're at the bottom doesn't mean that they're bad categories. It just means that perhaps that they're harder to make work. It takes more time to create meaningful companies in these categories. So we've seen less activity. But doing so successfully could still be very rewarding, both in terms of impact and financial success. And I just want to highlight two of my favorite categories here. So the first one is always on feedback. Feedback is how we grow as professionals. But if you ask, 65% of employees say that they don't receive enough feedback at work. And that's because it's tough. Feedback is time intensive to prepare. It's difficult to deliver. It's difficult to receive. In practice, it just doesn't happen very much. And I think the opportunity now is that we live in a world where suddenly more and more of our work lives are being recorded. So whether it's through browser extensions, video call recordings, even screen recordings with tools like Rewind, we live in a world where, in theory, we have the data to enable generative AI companies to capture the work products that we create, evaluate our performance, and provide us with detailed feedback on how we can improve. And that's what this category is about. So in terms of hotness score, this score is more at the lower end because it's a very nascent category. We only found 13 startups here, and none of those had actually raised capital in the last 12 months. But at the same time, it is a white space with next to no education-specific incumbents, so that we perceive the threat from incumbents to be very low. In a way, you can imagine that this category was pioneered by Grammarly, which I'm sure many know, which is focused on providing feedback on spelling, grammar, and tone of written text. But where we see this going really is in moving from language to more complex evaluation of interpersonal skills. So teaching, decisions, negotiations, leadership, interactions, sales, and basically observing us and interacting with other people doing these things and then giving us feedback on how to get better. And the challenge in doing that is that, out of the box, large language models are not very good at giving you feedback on these things precisely. It's not just building a successful product in this category. It's not just about applying LLMs to a corpus of user interaction data, call recordings from Zoom or whatever. It's also about training models on how to spot the key moments in these conversations that relate to the skills you're trying to improve on, and then training them on what good looks like against these key moments as well. So that's really tough. We'll take teams with deep expertise to tackle this, but I believe when someone cracks this will be a massive category. And then the second one, just to highlight quickly, simulation-based learning. Again, it makes a lot of sense to practice high-stakes situations in benign feedback environments, such as simulations, which of course gave birth to the flight simulator many years ago. And nowadays we're in a world where simulations are used to train skills in broader fields like surgery, mining, even some customer interactions. But what AI is now unlocking is that this idea of flight simulator training for complex interpersonal situations where you need the simulation to be fully dynamic and respond to you. For example, job interviews, sales pitches, negotiations, etc. So that's what this category is about. Again, a super nascent category, 7 startups, 4 million raised. It's probably one where incumbents have a slightly better shot at adapting and creating something meaningful before new startups, just because of how complex this is. This is about content, technology, pedagogy, assessment, all in one. We still think it's a very exciting category because it's just so large. Interpersonal skills are some of the most important skills people will be demanding in the future as AI continues to automate our jobs. And it's just so difficult to learn them today in the real world. So as an example, I've come across a job interview practice simulation company in Norway that I thought did an incredible job in the demo I was shown. And so I have a lot of hope for this category. And who knows, maybe with Apple Vision's Pro glasses coming out soon, perhaps we're going to see some unexpected growth in the AR category before long, which will also help here. I've covered sort of 4 of the 8 engines. If you want to learn more about the 8, I had to rush today to stay within the allotted time, but please get in touch with me using this QR code that's on the screen. I'll happily send you these slides and also more information about the categories that I didn't talk about today. And just very briefly, 3 key takeaways for AI Edtech founders. Firstly, we're still in the early innings. There's been very little money invested in AI Edtech companies, despite all the hype. 620 million is not a lot in relation to the total amount of funding that's gone into generative AI startups. So it's all to play for. So this is a great time to get involved. Second, are you a feature, a product, or a company? And, what we've seen is that generally speaking, incumbents have adapted quickly. And in order to build something really big, you have to build companies that fundamentally challenge the incumbent's business logic, because that will mean that you have enough time to get a head start on them. And then third, and most importantly, it's very important to have deep expertise in order to overcome problems like hallucination, bias, privacy. It's very easy to get value out of large language models quickly, but to build products that truly impact learning, that's a very complex task. So that's the kind of thing that we're looking for at Emerge when we look for founders, is the combination of that expertise and the big vision to go after these categories. But when we do find it, we're very, very excited about it. And we'd love to be in touch with anyone here who's building something in this space and would like to learn more. And contact information and the QR code again. Happy to take any questions, Alex.
Jan, is that the same QR code you had on before that
Yes.
people can use? Perfect. We had a request to get it back on the screen. Yes, fascinating. And I would certainly love to see the rest of these categories. I noticed hyper-personalization on there. That's a lot of interest, I think, to this group. So we had a couple of questions in the panel. I'm going to show them on the stage here and others can jump in. One is, what is your recommendation for EdTech startups in these high potential categories to not get lost in the noise? We've seen 300 new companies, incumbents are adding new things all the time. How do you stand out in this incredibly messy, noisy, early Cambrian explosion, we call it, of AI EdTech?
Yeah, and it goes back to the point I made earlier, right? There are certain categories where you've got literally hundreds of people building things that are very similar to each other. And it's knowing whether it's that point about knowing whether you're just a feature or whether you're actually building something that has the potential to become a real company. We are looking for companies, when we make investment decisions, that have the potential to sustain their advantage over the long term. And that often comes with one of two things. Either you're building deep tech that truly differentiates you on a technological level, and you're not just slapping on OpenAI and other open source APIs into a loosely held together product. You're building your own stuff. That's the small minority of companies we look at. Or you've built something that has the potential to really achieve viral growth. And so then you're creating an advantage because you're getting more user interaction data that's training your models and that's building a brand. And ultimately, that's probably the only way for some of these companies to win.
Here's a question from Jesse Silberberg about the L&D focus categories. For example, always on feedback, learning material co-pilots. Those are ones that can be used in workforce learning. How important do you see it to prove the ROI to company top and bottom lines? When people use, let's say, a Glean or something that they're incorporating into a corporate environment, will they focus on sales, or will they focus on other functions of a company to really make there be some kind of, like when you to mention bringing tribal knowledge in a company to the
Yeah.
surface? What is a company looking to achieve by doing that? How do they measure their impact?
Yeah. So when we look at companies selling into this segment, there's basically 3 levels of proving your impact. The first, which is the easiest but the least impactful, is showing engagement of end users with your product, and your end users basically telling their managers, yeah, this is great, we want to keep it. Second level down is that you start showing improved employee retention data. And the third level down is that you're actually showing an impact on the bottom line, which is extremely hard to do, even for sales training organizations. So if you can, definitely do that one, but it's super hard, and you can sell without it. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. And last one, and this is from me, you had these sort of two mega categories about making learning more engaging and making teaching more efficient. That's a typo, more teaching. And I think those are both interesting two sides of the coin in education. I know you had hotness levels for each of the subcategories, but if you had to place a bet on which of these categories is sort of explode faster, is it on the learning side or the teaching side? Where would you put your money?
I think this is an impossible question to answer, but if I had to, with a gun to my head, I'd probably say the AI knowledge graphs is the one
Hmm.
that's going to get there the quickest, which is on the efficiency side. But it's a fun question to ask because it's theatrical. I'm not sure I can give you an answer that is particularly valuable. But yeah, I give it a go.
Your category, your 100% hotness was the AI knowledge graphs, right?
Yes,
So
exactly.
that's gotcha. And then final quick question, within the world of making work and teaching more efficient, right? The second big category there, how do you prioritize between educators and the work side of things? The education work is so different than other types of work. And I know that EdTech sort of works in both education work and traditional work. How do you think about those two pieces?
Yeah, I think they're both incredibly important, and there's the opportunity to create time savings and optimize in both. When I think about impact, ultimately what I think would be the most impactful thing here across these two things is enabling educators to spend more real time with learners, building relationships, making them feel that they matter. That's where my heart goes when I see this question, but I
Yeah.
think there are businesses to be built in both.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much. I know we forced you to rush this a little bit, but you did an amazing job, and I feel like I just mainlined important information about the ed tech space and the AI space. And it is early days. We will follow up with you, and we'll send. I don't know if you're willing to share your slides. If possible, we will send them to the people after. But this has been absolutely fascinating. We only have a few minutes left, so if you want to try to grab Jan in the lounge, you can, but I don't think we're really going to have much time for that. In 5 minutes, we're basically going to have our final fireside chat with the superintendent of Linwood, California, speaking about what it's like to procure some of these AI tools from the school perspective. It's a perspective we haven't had very much of. We've had, I think, 40 founders here today, but I don't think we've had a single superintendent. So we're going to actually go right to that session after this one. And I'm really looking forward to that. I think this back to back of hearing this very seasoned, very structured thinking investor and a superintendent trying to make sense of this incredible cacophony of AI tools is going to be a really neat back to back. Thank you so much, Jan. We really appreciate you being here with us tonight.
Thanks, Alex. Great job on everything.
No, thank you. It's 1 a.m. your time. We really appreciate it. All right.
All right.
We'll see
See ya.
everybody else in the next session. Do a quick
Bye.
bio break. We'll see you there.